Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. It was a failed coup. Let's call it what it was. In the immediate aftermath of the January 6th attack and the early revelations of Donald Trump's attempts, both publicly and in private, to overturn a democratic election, there was a kind of back and forth among scholars about whether coup was the appropriate term. But as we learn more, it really does feel like that's the best way to describe what we are talking about here. And today we got new evidence that supports precisely that. Earlier today, the New York Times first reported that not only did Donald Trump press the Justice Department to say the results of the 2020 presidential election were corrupt, but there are contemporaneous notes that prove it. Quote, the exchange unfolded during a phone call on December 27th, less than 2 weeks before the attack on the Capitol, in which Mr. Trump pressed the acting attorney general at the time, Jeffrey Rosen, and his deputy, Richard Donahue, on voter fraud claims the department had disproved. Now, the thing is, Donahue, the deputy attorney general, was taking notes, and the Department of Justice turned those notes over to the House Oversight Committee, and today they publicly released some of them. Now, just a heads up, because they are handwritten, they're a little difficult to read. According to the deputy attorney general's notes, Donahue responded to Trump saying, quote, I understand that the DOJ can't and won't snap its fingers and change the outcome of the election. It doesn't work that way. To which Trump replied, don't expect you to do that. Just say the election was corrupt and leave the rest to me and Republican congressmen. Just say it was corrupt. The president is asking the Department of Justice to help him overturn the election and stay in power. Remember that a deputy attorney general is writing this down because in that moment, one imagines, he realizes the sheer transgressive gravity of what's happening. Somewhat reminiscent of former FBI Director James Comey's contemporaneous notes of his interactions with Trump. Holy crap, this guy is, whoa. I should put it in writing, what the president is asking us to do for posterity. We're learning about this now because the House Oversight Committee got access to these notes. But in May, Trump's acting attorney general, Jeffrey Rosen, who was on that call, was specifically asked about this under oath, and he dodged the question.
Prior to January 6th, were you asked or instructed by President Trump to take any action at the department to advance election fraud claims or to seek to overturn any part of the 2020 election results?
Well, Congressman, as just alluded to in your prior question, I can tell you what the actions of the department were.
No, sir.
Not,
no, sir.
Outcome was.
Mr. Rosen.
I cannot tell you,
Mr. Rosen.
consistent with my obligations today, about private conversations with the president one way or the other.
Keep in mind that as Trump was trying to get the Department of Justice to help him overturn the election, that was, of course, not the sum total of the plotting. Trump and his allies made multiple calls to the election officials in Maricopa County, Arizona, pressuring them, including one official who said he let the calls go to voicemail and did not return them. Trump called an official on the Wayne County, Michigan Board of Canvassers after she voted against certifying the county's election results. There was an invitation to the Republican leaders of the Michigan state legislature. They flew to D.C. to meet with Trump at the White House. There was the recording, of course, of Trump's call to Georgia's Republican Secretary of State. He actually made more than one, who Trump told, quote, I just want to find 11,780 votes. And when none of that worked, then, of course, there was the January 6th plot to overturn the election in Congress, to assemble a crowd, send them towards the Capitol to pressure Congress and his own vice president. And we are learning more about that as well. Republican Congressman Mo Brooks of Alabama is now facing a lawsuit over a speech he gave the morning of January 6th, explicitly telling the crowd to start, quote, kicking ass. This week, the Department of Justice denied representing Brooks in the case, arguing, among other reasons, quote, instigating an attack on the United States Capitol would not be within the scope of a member of Congress's employment. Fair point. It's clear Brooks was part of the planning for Trump's coup because Brooks said so himself. Check this out. Back on December 21st, 2020, more than 2 weeks before the insurrection, Politico just reported it out. Good piece by Melanie Zanona. President Donald Trump huddled with a group of congressional Republicans at the White House on Monday, where they strategized over a last-ditch effort to overturn the election results next month. Congressman Mo Brooks, who is spearheading the long-shot push to overturn the election results in Congress, organized the trio of White House meetings, which lasted over 3 hours and include roughly a dozen lawmakers. It was a back and forth concerning the planning and strategy for January 6th, Brooks said in a phone interview. I mean, he literally said they were meeting about strategy to overturn the election on the record 2 weeks before it happened. Then on the morning of January 6th, Congressman Mo Brooks spoke at the same rally as Donald Trump. And we're now learning that when he stood up there and spoke about taking the protests to the Capitol, he was wearing body armor.
I've got a message that I need you to take to your heart and take back home, and along the way, stop at the Capitol. Today is the day American patriots start taking down names and kicking ass. What are the words that scare the hell out of socialists and weak-kneed Republicans alike? Join with me. USA. USA. Washington, America, heed those words, because we're going to carry them right to you. USA, God bless America, and the fight begins today.
Yeah, go kick ass. Well, they did. I wonder if when Mo Brooks saw them beating the cops and concussing them and violently assaulting them, he thought, oh, they're kicking ass. I told them to kick ass. Mo Brooks was not the only congressman implicated in the plot to keep Trump in power. The New York Times reports Mr. Trump did not name the lawmakers, the ones who were helping him. But at other points during the call, again, this is the one that they took notes of, he mentioned Representative Jim Jordan of Ohio, whom he described as a fighter. A spokesman for Jordan said, quote, Congressman Jordan did not, has not, and would not pressure anyone at the Justice Department about the 2020 election. Sure. That Politico report from a few days before Trump's DOJ meeting says, quote, other members who were in attendance include some of Trump's staunchest allies on the Hill, such as Congressman Jim Jordan. So he was in the same meetings plotting on how to overturn the election. Earlier this week, Congressman Jordan was asked if he had spoken to Donald Trump on January 6th. Listen to this response.
First off, yes or no, did you speak with President Trump on January 6th?
Yeah, I mean, I spoke with the president last week. I speak with the president all the time. I spoke with him on January 6th. I mean, I talk with President Trump all the time, and that's I don't think that's unusual. I would expect members of Congress to talk with the president of the United States when they're trying to get done the things they told the voters in their district to do. I'm actually kind of amazed sometimes that people keep asking this. But of course, I talk to the president all the time. I talked with him, like I said, I talked with him last week.
On January 6th, did you speak with him before, during, or after the Capitol was attacked?
I'd have to go. I spoke with him that day after. I think after. I don't know if I spoke with him in the morning or not. I just don't know. I'd have to go back and. I mean, I don't know that when those conversations happened. But what I know is I spoke with him all the time.
Boy, he looked comfortable answering those questions, doesn't he? Now, if Jim Jordan was speaking to Donald Trump about the attack on the Capitol as it happened, he absolutely could not be on the committee investigating the attack because, as Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney pointed out, Jordan could be a material witness who's called to testify. At some level, the coup plot was done out in the open. I mean, reported in Politico. We all saw it. And when all else failed, when Trump could not pressure the election officials, when he could not enlist the Justice Department, when he did not have enough votes in Congress, the last thing left to him was the mob, and so he used the mob. That violent, bloody insurrection, the failed coup we saw, was his final attempt after he tried everything else, but he's not done trying.